First, I'm really delighted that you've asked me to come on here, yeah, and tell my story. What is my story? It's really just somebody who's very loving of nature. I've always loved trees, plants, animals, whatever it was, communicated, and being one of those slightly odd people. Off with the fairies is what people used to say to me. I trained as a landscape architect, then I worked with children, so always on the periphery of this whole movement in society. I was against the transhumanist from birth, I think. So I've moved even closer to being with nature. And in this time, I felt really rather frustrated about what could I do because there's so much censorship. The information I wanted to get across wasn't being seen or heard. And so I started to be much more working on the spiritual, energetic side, doing healing for, obviously for myself, my family, my friends, my beloved man. And then decided to work much more consciously doing healing work for the earth, the energy lines, and knowing what I know now about all of the darkness of the various different sacrifices over millennia on this planet, and starting to understand how that was making everything very heavy and difficult atmospherically and energetically. So I worked on that, and I have a powerful voice because the other thing about me is that I've always sung. I love to sing, and I actually sang before I spoke, and I won my first competition when I was tiny, and I taught singing for years, and I've had 3 albums out, and so I love the voice, but I've been using my voice in an overtone way, very powerful, and using the overtones to change things on a quantum level. And when I started to use my voice in that way, then I started to get some very, very interesting experiences. I started to feel elements, different elementals. So that's talking to the clouds, talking to the water. Very much interesting to talk to the actual consciousness body of water and wind. I was doing a lot of weather modification, working with the elementals. But then what started to happen was this fairy being appeared. And this fairy appeared, and I was just delighted and amazed, but I started to talk with her telepathically. And there are 3 ways I do that. So I will literally just have a conversation with her, with anyone. You can do this if you train yourself, and I've trained myself through many, many years of teaching improvisation. So you just listen and you ask questions and listen. And so you have to do it both times recording out loud. So ask the question out loud, listen, and then record the answer. And so I was having long conversations with her and then drawing pictures, images. That's the second way for me of communicating. And the third is through basically experiences going outside when I had an intuitive impulse to go outside. So I would be speaking telepathically, writing telepathically, drawing telepathically, and going outside. So again, there are many ways to contact beings, and I found out a lot more about who or what she is since. How the way they look is quite amazing, actually. I've now looked at hundreds of stills from the footage. The footage of the filming, I've only really got a few minutes, sort of, I think in total about 13 minutes. Because they're usually very short durations, but then I slow them down, maybe to 5% of the speed or 20% of the speed, and start to see things in the images. And what really blew my mind was that I realized that whoever it was I was talking to and seeing was riding a vehicle. A vehicle was being ridden, of some kind. And it looked like it was a manufactured vehicle. In other words, it wasn't an animal. It wasn't like a fairy riding a dragon. No, no, no. There was some kind of technology. And so, of course, I asked many, many questions. But what I kept on seeing is a kind of basically like a hover bike. So a small, flexible vehicle. And the interesting thing is that I've seen that now on lots of other people's footage because people keep sending me images and little bits of film that they found, and I can recognize something, and I say, can I have a look at your footage? And I'll slow it down and send them back these slides because I'm seeing a pattern These beings have a certain kind of technology. Mostly they are, there's two-pronged messages coming through from Earthy. So, for example, she's brought up the idea of farming. It was the day we had in Britain recently, the farmers have been protesting various strange different laws, part of the whole World Economic Forum idea of restricting agriculture and our food. So that was very much on my mind. So we started discussing agriculture. And she was talking about many different kinds of farming, how we should, and we're going to be. She had no doubt about it. We're going to be reverting much more to small farms, family farms, people hands-on working with the soil, with the plants, with the animals, because not only is it beautiful for us, the way we can eat food that's been touched and handled with love, it's wonderful for the animals. And she went on to talk about a whole new system of using priests for killing animals. And at the moment, we take animals and put them in a truck. They know it's filled with fear, and they all know they're going to be killed. It's a kind of build-up of fear. It's a dreadful thing. They go to a big, large factory abattoir and get killed. And she was saying, Elsie was saying, no, you're going to have animal priests. I love this idea so much. And they will come from farm to farm. That will be their job. And they work, and it's a blessing and a release and a conversation with the animal, rather like the American Indians or the Aboriginals in their reciprocal dealings with animals. So that really moved me a lot. Then, of course, we just had whole conversations about the soil and what they do. They ensure that the right kind of minerals are given to the plants, so that if a plant needs more copper, they will literally go and herd a group of insects or little arthropods who contain lots of copper in their bodies. So they come to that area where the plant needs copper, and when they finish their life scale, when they finish, they die, and their body becomes the nutrition for the plants. So this complete awareness of the ecosystems is very much what they're trying to bring back to us. You know, organic farming, I've always loved that, but they're taking it a step or two or three or four, five further. So there's a lot of talk about farming, lots of other things too. So how else did you want to leave your show? They were very, very hopeful about humanity's future, which is really beautiful. There was no if and when and oh, we've got to avoid this. It was why this is what's going to happen. So firstly, they talked about how we and they are going to be operating in the same space. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of them. And literally, that was, I think she said that to me about 6 weeks ago. And in this last 6 weeks, there has been this enormous increase of sightings of these kind of beings. So already it's happening. So that's one thing. But why would we be seen in the same space? Why would we be in this other dimension? They are interdimensional beings. They're of a sort of like a higher octave to us. And that's why we haven't seen them for a long time. But we're creeping up to them. So we're slowly in this thing that we're calling the ascension worldwide, this energetic shift because of the planet herself, because of all kinds of different things. One of which is getting rid of the heavy energies. We're just merging. And so our future looks like we're going to become much more ecological, much more aware, much more in conversation with all of the elements of nature. So the complete and utter opposite of the transhumanist agenda. And the Fae also joke about our little black boxes, our phones, because of the way that we are programmed into sitting in front of them all day and looking at them all day, and it's almost like we disappear inside like virtual reality would have us be. But they tend to put the emphasis away from that. So yes, we'll have our computers, but there will be much more movement with the humans doing things because they love them, because they enjoy the movement of their body and the health of their body. So there was no question about it. She seemed very, very certain, which is lovely. I think 2025 is going to be a year of turbulence. We're seeing the pot being stirred already now. We know the big things are happening in politics. Just the fact that President Trump was re-elected is a figurehead standpoint for something big. We can see governments falling all over the place. So on that outward shell, things are shifting. Now suddenly we've got this apparent drone invasion in the United States. People are talking about mechanical, technical objects floating around in the sky, flying around in the sky, or organic plasmoids, the kind of beings that I'm seeing, the other dimensional, fae, ant people, whatever you want to call them. So we're already getting this heating up of something is going to be happening in 2025. All of my feelings are that it's going to be really chaotic until April. I believe that we're going to get more and more build-up of this tension. It's like a tidal wave, adding layers and layers of weirdness. It's like everyone supposedly normal is starting to be weirded out. Weird in the best way, in that we become aware that, yes, things are not as they seem. Other miraculous things are possible. And eventually people's cognitive dissonance is being kind of etched away, moved away, eroded away, almost like by this water stream of newness. I don't think we need to have catastrophe. There are people saying, oh, it's going to be a closing one. I know that's okay. If they want to create that, I think there are enough of us that it's going to be fairly smooth, but it's going to be tense. I believe we're going to have tension building, and then ping, 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 one thing after another sort of opens up and reveals itself. I think we'll be pretty happy by August. I was just thinking personally, because obviously I'm quite interested in my personal life, where it's going. I've had my beloved man, for example, he lives in the United States, and we couldn't be together because it was just incredibly dangerous. So we talk to each other barely in a kind of code. I can't say any more than that. And so obviously I'm sort of reaching for when could we, be normal? when could we two meet again? And so I'm using all my ceilings to work it through. And every time I look in a kind of open, receiving, prayerful way, I feel that August is the time that things are going to have evened out. So tension until March, the end of March, a kind of release in April, which used to be the beginning of the year. You think about spring, April the 1st used to be the beginning of the springtime, funnily enough. And then this sort of gradual release until we're finally kind of celebrating. We're feeling a little bit more relieved. Some of the darker elements have been very much more exposed, and we're able to actually enjoy being humans again. Where are we going as a planet? These changes. Where would we like to go? I think that's the first thing. Let's just say the last 6 years has been this massive explosion of information. So we're not only aware of, oh, the government does terrible things, we're understanding the mechanics behind why the government does terrible things. And once people get that far, they start to become inquisitive and go further and further until we are uncovering ancient restrictions and control systems inflicted upon us, human beings. And so a lot of us are questioning what has actually happened with our spirits, our souls. Are we being made to be slaves for something? Is there this emotional loosh being gathered from the entertainment industry stimulating our emotions? Is it that every single decision we make is actually pre-programmed and controlled and decided? And the more and the deeper that people have gone in, we're starting to see these patterns. So this is something I've loved to study for a long time. I wrote books back in 2011-12 called The Transmissions from the Planet Zog. And Milo and Teal were two children from the future who came to work with children here on Earth to help us be aware of nature and humanity and how to develop and flourish as souls. So it's something I've been really, really aware of. So what I see now for the planet, we've been told it's the end of the Kali Yuga, or in the age of Aquarius. We understand there is this movement, but what is that? Is it that we're in a certain place in the cosmos, in the solar system, or in the galaxy? Or is there something else? Now, I've had conversations with the Earth, because as I said, you can talk to anybody or anything. I bring in source, creator, God, however we want to label it, so that I'm very, very anchored in as much truth and clarity as possible. And with that, I will have conversations with, say, the Earth. She likes to be called Anna. And we talked about what she's going through and what I could, one little human, what can I do? What can I do to help? Because I've tried everything else with bringing information out on ecology and awareness and plants and da da da. So we got down to the fact that over centuries there have been mechanics to keep humans suppressed. And a lot of it was through fear. Not just the modern day entertainment industry, but a lot of, yeah, I have to use the word, a lot of culling, a lot of killing, a lot of sacrifice of children and innocents, women and young men, and that created a fear stranglehold on the energy centers on the planet. And as more and more people in the last few decades have kind of woken up to this knowing that it's not just, oh, what a beautiful shiny pyramid on that energy center, but we realized the pyramid was constructed for very dark purposes of control. So as we release those souls through working with Creator and Source, and the souls return back to where they should have been, back to their full spirit self, the whole energy changes. And that's why I was able to see the fairy, because that was the mechanics of what I was doing in my local environment. Change this atmosphere because the heavy energy was released. As that happens all around the planet, the whole planet rises, so the octave of resonance changes. So we are shifting into being able to see fairies, being able to be feeling of nature, be able to converse with nature. I love that question of how can we prepare ourselves with a vibration that's going to help us go transition smoothly. So I'll just say what I do. And as I just sort of mentioned, that I have a great difficulty in that my beloved man isn't with me and I can't speak to him. So I have to deal with that on a daily basis. And that's not easy. I have children who live abroad. So I have a lot of, interesting things to deal with. So what do I do to keep happy? Joy is the thing I aim for. That's the highest vibration as far as I'm concerned. So how do I get my joy? Nature first. Okay, so it is dark in winter in the United Kingdom, but still I go out and get as much sunshine as I can. So that nature balance, I work with the soil, I say hello to the birds, I chat to the animals I meet. So that interaction, first and foremost, because it's the basis and foundation. I eat very clean, very basic raw materials, always organic food. I cook everything from scratch. I drink lots of beautiful water. So I look after my body that way. The same thing with, I don't put anything synthetic on me. It's even the perfumes are genuine ones, the clothes I wear. So I'm very much looking after the whole spectrum of the body. But then, okay, that's not enough. That's not enough because we've got ideas and tragedies and disasters and tensions coming at us. So I use my voice to regulate. So I use an overtone system, which I teach. It's a way of using the entire body. You use every single muscle in the body to actually produce sound. And it's as though you take the thoughts from your mind and heart and focus it into sound. And of course, sound is raw manifestation. You're literally alchemizing energy when you make sound, because that sound's never existed before. So you can bring information and energy through from source by orientating your body to your heart, to your soul, and letting sound come out. So those are my methods. Of course, yeah, exercise, that's part of being in nature. But that way, to keep my vibration, yes, of course it dips here and there, but to bring it back to where I should be, connected fully into my soul. So I've had conversations with her. I call her Elfie. I go for her name Elfiesenstein. But sorry, it's not a long name. But Elfie is how she goes by. And so I've had now, I think, maybe 7 different conversations with her. One was just automatic writing, which is quite fun. And you just literally ask in your mind and then write down. Type is what I tend to do with that. And then the other conversations, I will film myself sometimes so that I concentrate. That really makes me focus. And then I'm literally stating a question. I use a countdown method, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, to allow her voice to come through, so that I create a separation in my mental focus. Because obviously, if it's one person doing the questioning and allowing the answering through, it's a different kind of channeling. It's a kind of channeling, but most channelers just vacate their entire body. Their spirit steps aside. And that can be quite dangerous because other elements, different beings can come in. So I practice a telepathy, which is literally just asking and then allowing, listening, and then allowing her voice to come through mine. I think we've had a lot of misinformation about both. Fairy tales, I read every fairy tale I could find as a child. Angels we know from churches and all sorts of different religious texts as a being with wings of special high grace. And yet we're finding out that there are some supposed bad fairies. Some of the fairies are from the more demonology side of things, perhaps, darker entities. Some of the angels may be a little more manipulative than we perhaps think, but they're certainly higher octave beings. So beings which can move around and fly, whether they have wings or not is another thing altogether, but I'm positive they can move and materialize when they want. Question is, are fairies and angels the same? Well, they might be. If you haven't seen an aeroplane before, but you see something flying, you might think of it as a cylinder with wings, because you've seen birds flying. So it depends on where your point of reference is, whether you see something as an angel or a fairy. And I'm seeing a lot of people in these groups. I belong to a group on Facebook called Orbs, all about orbs and various strange and interesting phenomena. And you'll see people say, this was an angel, and this was my dead brother, and this was my dead dog, and and I get all these different people. And because I've started to study it quite deeply, I look for different signs in the images. And I think we've got a lot of different beings that we're not used to contacting, from the more technologically created little greys who I've spoken to. They seem to be working on the more energetic framework of reality, not the tangible, but how energy is transferred into the tangible. So that's one group of beings that people see. Then you've got all these different kinds of fairies. So fairies, elves, gnomes, pixies, which tend to be inner earth beings, and some people call them the ant people. Corey Good just called them. He had the Nordics and he had other beings in the inner earth. So there's so many different types, even giants. When one of those appears in your room, you might think it's an angel, but it might be something else. We're starting to just rewrite the alphabet. We know very little. We've got a huge heritage, very mixed up, and so we're starting to understand. Basically, we can't jump to conclusions. We need to ask, we need to inquire, research, and have as many conversations with these beings as possible. So where do fairies live? Well, I asked Elfie, where do you live? But if I wanted to know what size she was, I wanted to understand why sometimes I would see her being really small and sometimes really big. She explained that's about coming through from her dimension into our dimension. It's like popping through into our reality. That changes the size. But where do you live? So she said, well, we live in the realm to the top of the trees, to the bottom of the roots. That's what she said to me. And I thought, this is kind of, okay, they could live above the surface, we just can't see them because they're in another dimension. Below the surface, how do you as a being move through the soil? I mean, maybe, we're told that ghosts can move through walls. A fish swims through water. We walk through air. We're always in something. So maybe it's perfectly normal for them to move through the soil. However, and I think they do on a dimensional level, I think they can literally move through the soil because they just have a different dimensional interface with the matter. And yet, all of the work I've read, Radu Cinema books on inner earth, really fascinating. It's as though you go to a different dimensional plane. And whenever I've gone in telepathically or journeyed with, like a friend of mine, a psychic from New Zealand at Stables, we did some work together with Elfie. And we just found this interface, a dimensional interface. We were both seeing like wavy lines of blue and green. And that corresponded to the inner earth books of Radu Cinema, that you go into another dimension. So they are in the earth, but it's not like drilling down. Oh, I drill down, 4 kilometers or 8 miles or whatever. It's that it's once you get through a certain depth, there is a shift in dimension. It's like going from the physical body to the spirit body. So they live on another plane that's almost like us moving from our physical body into our spirit. I have had questions of why why have you a kid? It's amazing, I love it, but why? In fact, my beautiful little granddaughter, 3.5-year-old, she said, Grandma, why can you see fairies? Because I think when I told her about Elfie the fairy, she kind of wanted to see her, because 5 minutes later she was drawing a picture of the fairy. And it was sort of, I'm awake and alert and fully connected into spirit, and I can't see a fairy. Why can Grandma? That was, I think, what was going on in her mind. And so, of course, I said to Elsie, why are you showing yourself at this time? I love it, but tell me why. And she said that it's because they want to literally to kind of point out that the work I've done has effect. It has meaning. So I was working with the elementals and weather, mitigating with a whole group of people, but we were mitigating the storm, the Helene storm in Florida and the Milton hurricane. And then I was working with these sacrificial sites, cleaning them and releasing the souls. And she was saying, we want you, if we're going to show you ourselves, if you're going to be seeing us, you need to talk about us. We want you to be a spokesperson to bring across all of this information. I said, well, I'm very happy to do that because that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about anyway. In this world, we're taught, first we were taught that we are oppressed, then we were taught who our oppressors were, and then we were kind of helpless, frustrated, and people told us to, sit back and eat the popcorn while the white hats got on with things. And that's frustrating and enslaving in another way. But what she showed me was that my soul intuition to do something had effect. So if you get an impulse to do something, but you don't quite trust yourself that it has merit or meaning or worth, do it anyway and persevere in it. And you will find that the energy of that will bring other people to you. So I had various friends who kind of turned up saying, oh yes, I got a message from you. This being turned up and said, well done, you're doing wonderful, keep going. Or I had these elementals say, we love the work you're doing. So I would get these different people supporting me. But it wasn't like I went out to get that information. It came because I knew I had to do something with my one precious life, with my energy, with my awareness. It was as though I was sitting in the back and had so much knowledge and couldn't bring it. The world didn't want to hear it. It wasn't ready, and it was a frustration. So the message would be, you can do a lot of work from your own little house, your own little home. Use your heart, use your mind, connect to spirit. And if you have an impulse to do it, do it. And then keep doing it and watch what happens. I've made a link tree with all my links because that seems to be the easiest way. And you can see two things that are very important for me. I work with Gnostic TV. We're going to be setting up a university and bringing in lots of wonderful people, wonderful knowledge. And I have two new courses there. One's called Living as Medicine, and the other one is about using your voice to empower you to do all kinds of things. So that's in my link tree, but there are groups on Facebook you can join there to work with clearing the ancient sacrificial sites and working with the weather, and you can contact me through my website. So it's all in that little link tree.